Most people have beliefs they simply refuse to change. Things they learn from society or from their parents. They think those things are 100% correct. And I'm not even talking about ordinary people. Even scientists have held completely wrong beliefs they wouldn't change. Whenever someone came and said, "Sir, your idea is wrong. Shouldn't we change it?" they'd say, No, this guy's crazy. Don't listen to him." People who, during their lifetimes, were called insane. But years after their deaths, everyone realized they were right and not insane at all. In this video, we're going to meet a few of these so-called mad people. The first madman. Let's go to Hungary and meet a man named Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a doctor working at the Central Hospital of Vienna. You might ask, what does Vienna have to do with Hungary? Vienna is in Austria. You should know that at that time, this whole region was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis worked in the maternity ward. He noticed something terrifying. In this hospital, 18% of women who came to give birth were dying. Ignaz thought about this constantly. He'd say, "These women arrive completely healthy. So why do they die after giving birth?" He watched the doctors delivering babies, and very quickly he noticed something. The first thing these doctors did every morning was perform autopsies. They opened up corpses to determine the cause of death, and after that, with the same hands, they walked into the maternity ward and delivered babies. This was the 1840s, but Ignaz was thinking far ahead of his time. He said, "These doctors come straight from autopsies and deliver children with the same hands." He gathered the doctors and said, "We need to do something." They asked, "What do you want us to do?" He answered, "From now on, before entering the maternity ward, wash your hands with chlorine." They laughed. "Why would we do that?" He realized they didn't understand, so he said he wanted to run an experiment. Since he was a higher-ranking physician, they had to listen. They washed their hands with chlorine, and unbelievably, the mortality rate dropped from 18% to under 2%. At that time, neither germs nor infections were known. Ignaz didn't know that microscopic organisms existed, but he sensed that chlorine did something important. He had saved countless women. He was a hero. But guess how they treated him? They said, "This drop in mortality has nothing to do with your hand washing. We just became better doctors." These doctors were so arrogant. They told Ignaz, "You're just jealous of us. You know our hands are the hands that save humanity. And now you're accusing us of having dirty hands? You're the dirty one. You're the crazy one." Ignaz Semmelweis, a doctor ranking above all of them, became their punching bag. They told him, "Sit down. Stop talking nonsense." Ignaz grew frustrated. Why wouldn't they accept it? But since he didn't have a scientific explanation, he couldn't prove it. He kept saying, "Wash your hands with chlorine, and the deaths will drop." They answered, "It's none of your business. Stop interfering." And then they fired him. They said he was obsessive, that he needed treatment, that he was mentally unstable. Everywhere he went, people recognized him as that crazy obsessive doctor, so no hospital would hire him. He stayed home, sinking into deep depression. By 1865, Ignaz was only 47 years old, and they still didn't leave him alone. They arrested him and took him to an insane asylum. Back then, mental asylums were worse than prisons. Ignaz lasted only 2 weeks inside. He was beaten, wounded, and died from those very wounds. Because that's how they treated patients there. They beat everyone. Ignaz Semmelweis died in misery, poverty, and under torture. The tragic part? Only a few years later, Louis Pasteur discovered germs and proved that microscopic organisms cause disease. Just 4 years after Ignaz died, Pasteur said, Semmelweis discovered this problem more than 21 years ago. If Pasteur hadn't had microscope evidence, they would have thrown him into an asylum too. Today, everything is disinfected. Even before giving an injection, the skin is sterilized. All thanks to discoveries Ignaz had already understood decades earlier. Semmelweis's name is now eternal. The second madwoman. Her name was Rachel Carson. She was an American biologist who knew marine life, land animals, and plants. In 1962, she published a book titled Silent Spring. In this book, she talked about the pesticides sprayed on crops. The most important one she focused on was DDT. She said DDT not only harms crops, but in the long run, damages animals and humans. She wrote clearly, DDT is carcinogenic and destroys human DNA. The title, Silent Spring, was meaningful. A spring that should be green, alive, singing, but pesticides turn it silent. When the book spread, the high-power chemical companies producing these pesticides launched a campaign against her. They said she was a crazy conspiracist trying to destroy their products. The biggest company attacking her was the German giant Bayer. They crushed her with advertising and influence. And under all that pressure, Rachel Carson became ill, developed breast cancer, and died only 2 years later, in 1964. Just 8 years after her death, in 1972, it became officially confirmed that DDT is highly carcinogenic, and it was banned in the United States. The third madman, a geochemist named Claire Patterson. His life's work was studying Earth, and one of his major goals was determining the precise age of the planet. He spent years analyzing minerals containing lead, and he discovered something alarming. The amount of lead in human bodies was extremely high. He knew lead was toxic, so he investigated the cause, and soon realized that lead in gasoline was spreading through the air, entering everyone's lungs, and poisoning the entire planet. He couldn't stay silent. He began shouting to the world, "There's lead in gasoline, and you're killing people." This was the 1960s, and oil companies were unimaginably powerful. They attacked him the same way chemical companies attacked Rachel Carson. They called him a conspiracist, a madman, someone not worth listening to. But Claire Patterson didn't give up. He abandoned his primary scientific work and dedicated his life to fighting leaded gasoline. By the early 1970s, as media grew, his message reached the public. People realized something was wrong. In 1970, the U.S. government pressured automakers and oil companies to move toward unleaded fuel. When lead was finally removed from gasoline, the level of lead in human blood worldwide dropped dramatically. All thanks to Claire Patterson. He gave up his own life's work to protect humanity. The final madman, someone everyone knows, Galileo of 17th century Italy. When Galileo visited the Netherlands, he saw the first telescopes and built an even better one. With it, he observed the solar system, the moons of Jupiter, and more. He became the first person to say, "We are not the center of the universe. We are just a planet orbiting the sun." Today, this sounds simple, but in 1615, in Italy, the church held absolute power, and Galileo's words contradicted church doctrine. If he had been any other scientist, the church would have executed him. But Galileo was famous, valuable, so they only warned him. He ignored the warnings. He stood by his words. Church officials met and said, "This man is dangerous. He's teaching people to think. We need to get rid of him." But they couldn't kill him. The public would revolt. So they declared him suspected of heresy and sentenced him to house arrest. 8 years, locked in his home, and there he died, heartbroken. Years passed. Scientists confirmed his ideas. Everyone realized he had been right. Believe it or not, over 300 years later, in 1992, the Vatican finally apologized and admitted they had been wrong. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe soon because we have more of these interesting videos throughout the week. Have a nice day.